Picture this. You're walking under the canopy of pecan and mulberry trees, brushing past rosemary and lemongrass. Beside you, volunteers kneel in the soil, carefully pulling weeds or planting new seeds. Someone else kneels beside a bed of herbs, brushing their hands over the leaves and teaching others how to use them in tea. There's a calmness in the air, something you don't find often in downtown Austin. This is Festival Beach Food Forest, a 3-acre public oasis where community comes together to care for the land and share its harvest. They care for it with their hands, time, and shared knowledge, ensuring this space thrives as both a garden and a community. But this little slice of green space faces an uncertain future. Just blocks away, the Texas Department of Transportation plans to expand I-35 into a massive 22-lane highway. It's a $4.5 billion project with promises of better traffic flow and infrastructure. At what cost, though? For the food forest, for its neighbors, and for Austin as a whole, the I-35 expansion represents a collision between public infrastructure and the protection of natural spaces. We're Emmalie, Jemelka, Carla, Garcia, Leija, and MJ Green, and we've spoken to environmental scientists, local organizers, and community members to better understand what Festival Beach Food Forest means to its community, how the I-35 expansion could reshape this relationship between humans, non-humans, and the land, and why this project echoes a history of injustice in Austin's East Side. Because this isn't just about a highway, it's about who we want to be as a city.
Festival Beach Food Forest was formed just 10 years ago. What was once an empty field of Bermuda grass is now a vibrant living ecosystem. On their website, Festival Beach Food Forest tells the history and roots of this project. This project was first envisioned by community activists from the East Feast Coalition, who recognized the power of community members connecting, growing, and celebrating together. Grounded in their neighborhood's heritage and inspired by the possibility of renewing relationships with the land and with each other, they gathered neighbors and allies in support of edible landscaping. The idea of the Festival Beach Food Forest took root over the course of 2 years of community conversations convened by the Parks and Recreation Department as part of the master plan process. It has been nourished by ongoing community contributions of time, talent, and resources ever since. Grace Gilker, a longtime volunteer, told us what the food forest has come to represent.
I know that 10 years ago, before they planted anything, it was just Bermuda and 2 pecan trees, and that was it. So in terms of biodiversity, that's 2 species, not a lot. And now I think we've got over 170 types of plants.
This isn't just a garden. It's a community hub. The food forest is open to everyone. Anyone can visit, forage, and learn about permaculture practices. It's also a vital green space for the residents of the RBJ Center, a nearby senior living complex. Designed with permaculture principles, it's an ecosystem that fosters tangible change. It's a place to gather, to reconnect with the land, and to find relief from the city's heat and noise. A kind of sanctuary in the urban sprawl. The food forest also plays a vital role in citizen science, with volunteers tracking shifts in temperature throughout the space, a concept known as microclimate. Whereas climate is recorded in kilometers, microclimate can change within meters. On one of the hottest days of the year, June 8th, 2024, it was recorded that the inside of the food forest had a heat index nearly 9 degrees cooler than outside of it. This temperature difference is not just a number. It's a direct, physical benefit for the community. It's a safe haven from the extreme heat that's becoming all too common. And it's not just the heat that's being mitigated. The design of the food forest is comprised of berms and swales, components of permaculture practices that enhance the space's natural resilience. The outer berms, also known as barrier berms, serve an additional crucial function. They reduce the noise from nearby I-35, giving residents a break from the constant hum of traffic. Whether it's extreme weather or the relentless noise of urban life, the food forest offers a much-needed reprieve, something Grace says has been especially important in times of crisis.
During the freeze apocalypse of that was still 2021. A lot of volunteers sort of sprung into action and delivered food and supplies to people in the RBJ towers. I think there's a lot of food forest people who have ended up sort of serving as social workers for, folks who are also drawn to the food forest for, the shade and the temperature and the sort of like, until very recently, the gas station and like tables nearby.
But this space didn't appear overnight. It was the result of years of volunteer work, planting trees, hauling mulch, and building trust with the community. And now, its future hangs in the balance. The I-35 expansion doesn't just threaten the food forest ecosystem. It threatens the relationships and resilience it represents.
To understand what's at stake, we need to talk about I-35. Interstate 35 is one of the country's busiest highways. Here in Austin, it splits the city in two, a physical and symbolic barrier between East Austin, a historically Black and Latino neighborhood, and the city's white downtown. And that's no accident. This is an example of slow violence, a term used to describe harm that happens gradually over time and disproportionately affects marginalized communities. When I-35 was originally constructed, it displaced families, uprooted neighborhoods, and reinforced racial segregation. Its presence has since brought decades of environmental, economic, and social harm to East Austin. In the 1928 Austin Master Plan, the city deliberately moved Black and Latino residents to East Austin, pushing segregation and disinvestment that would shape Austin for decades. Now, nearly a century later, the Texas Department of Transportation, or TxDOT, wants to expand I-35. It's called the Capital Express Central Project. For $4.5 billion, TxDOT plans to widen the highway to 22 lanes, adding managed lanes, rebuilding bridges, and supposedly improving pedestrian paths. However, not everyone believes that TxDOT's promises will hold up. Rethink 35 is a grassroots organization founded in 2020, pushing back on the I-35 expansion. According to Rethink 35's website, highway expansions don't reduce traffic. They actually make it worse, through a process called induced demand. When you build more lanes, more cars fill them, and traffic congestion comes right back. They cite examples like the Katy Freeway in Houston, where commute times increased by 55% after expansion. And this isn't just about traffic. Rethink 35 highlights the human cost of this project. Elena Morales-Grahl, a community outreach coordinator at Rethink 35, spoke with us on the issue.
I think it's 84% of people who will be displaced by the expansion are low income or minority people, as well as the businesses. Also, the expansion of the highway, we're increasing our reliance on cars. We're moving funding away from other modes of transportation like public transportation. This is going to impact marginalized communities the most. People who can't afford cars, people who maybe have a disability and can't drive a car. We're just perpetuating that need for cars to get around Austin.
Opposition groups like Rethink 35 propose alternatives, like converting I-35 into an urban boulevard that prioritizes pedestrians, bikes, and public transit. But so far, TxDOT has refused to seriously consider these options. So what does this mean for places like Festival Beach Food Forest? And what are the environmental and social consequences for its neighbors?
Festival Beach Food Forest is a delicate ecosystem. It thrives on permaculture principles, working with nature, not against it. But the I-35 expansion threatens that balance. Dr. Michael Barrett, an environmental and water resources engineer at UT Austin, explains one major concern: stormwater runoff.
The state agencies can ignore whatever the city wants to do in terms of water quality. So the state agencies include UT itself. So UT doesn't follow the city's water quality rules, and neither does TxDOT. And so there's, curb inlets and storm drains and whatnot over in East Austin that go underneath 35 and discharge into Waller Creek untreated. And so what's going to happen here going forward is that they're going to lower I-35, which is going to cut off all those pipes that were going to Waller Creek. So all of that water from East Austin that went to Waller Creek is now going to go and stay in the TxDOT right-of-way.
Polluted water isn't the only concern. Increased car traffic means more air pollution, tiny particles that settle into the soil and on plants. For a place like the food forest, that could impact its ability to provide healthy food for the community. Grace Gilker explains how this expansion could alter the space forever.
We've got a lot of immunocompromised gardeners and volunteers. So I think the air concern is top of mind. The sound concern is going to be kind of brutal.
But the I-35 expansion doesn't just threaten the food forest. It's also raising serious concerns for residents of the nearby RBJ Center, a senior living facility that sits just steps away from the project site. The RBJ Center serves low-income seniors, many of whom rely on the peace and accessibility of nearby green spaces like Festival Beach Food Forest. For them, this expansion isn't just abstract, it's personal. For residents of the RBJ Center, the I-35 expansion feels like more than just a construction project. It's another disruption in a long history of decisions made for East Austin, not with it. When we visited the RBJ Center to speak with residents, we were met with quiet frustration. Many of them declined to comment, not out of disinterest, but perhaps because they had been asked too many times by too many people. The city, TxDOT, and outside organizations all ask for input, but rarely offer meaningful solutions in return. One thing they did tell us, the RBJ Center held a meeting about the expansion. This silence says something in itself. When public discussions don't lead to action, they lose their value for people they're supposed to serve. This pattern, asking communities for input without truly listening, is familiar for East Austin. Elena Morales-Grau from Rethink I-35 puts it into perspective.
We talk about the history of the building of I-35 and how it was built with racist intent with the goal of pushing Black and Latina people to East Austin and segregating the city. There's very clear documents that show that that was the goal. Expanding the highway sort of perpetuates that barrier that was set back in the original construction of I-35.
The I-35 expansion represents more than just construction. It's a decision, one that echoes a century of displacement, segregation, and environmental harm in Austin's east side. Because infrastructure isn't neutral. Highways, bridges, buildings, these aren't just concrete and steel. They're political. They reflect the values of those in power. Whose needs are prioritized? Whose voices are heard? And whose communities are sacrificed in the name of progress? And for East Austin, this isn't a new story. It's one that's been written over and over again. For the Festival Beach Food Forest, this expansion threatens to undo a decade of community care, stewardship, and resilience. For the residents of the RBJ Center, it threatens their health, peace, and access to spaces that make life feel just a little more livable. It's easy to see a highway and see concrete and cars, but if you look closer, you'll see the people and the land that bear its weight. So, what can you do? Organizations like Rethink I-35 and the Festival Beach Food Forest need your support. Whether it's attending public meetings, advocating for sustainable alternatives, or simply sharing these stories, your voice matters. Because the future of Austin isn't set in stone or in asphalt. It's a choice, and it's up to us to make the right one. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We hope it inspires you to take action, to rethink what's possible, and to imagine an Austin where justice, connection, and nature can flourish side by side. This podcast was produced for our Environmental Anthropology class at the University of Texas at Austin. Special thanks to Festival Beach Food Forest, Rethink I-35, Dr. Michael Barrett, and the residents of East Austin for sharing their time and stories with us. We're Carla Garcia, Leija, MJ Green, and Emmalie Jemelka. Thanks for listening.